We are about to do the other half of this Trials and Triumphs mini-series, as Paige mentioned earlier. It's a pretty straightforward name of what we're talking about. Praising God, giving thanks to God in the trials and in the triumphs. It's pretty simple. In the bad times and in the good times, we give thanks to God. So you want to do this series at this time specifically because, you know, there's a thing coming up pretty soon. I forget what it's called. Oh yeah, Thanksgiving. And so it's the time when we, talk about being, thankful. And so, we as Americans, we have a whole federal holiday dedicated to Thanksgiving. You guys have a whole week off because of Thanksgiving. So I think it's a little bit worth talking about. So therefore, we're going to do what I know you all came here to do, which is, yes, exactly, learn history about Thanksgiving. So we're going to do a pop quiz. Yep, you're all excited about a pop quiz. Learning history. So I got a history teacher degree in college, so I got to do a little bit of that. So we're going to do this in a certain way. I want to see hands raised to answer this question, and nobody just shouting out, Lauren Moore, the answer. And if you get it right...
I didn't bring my kid, so she can't yell out either.
And if you get it right, I'll give you a candy bar on the way to Smuggler's. The full-size candy bar from Yeah, I know. It's crazy. So, that sound good? Sound good? Alright. So, first question. Well, there's only two questions, but first question.
Only two. Two questions. Wow.
During what war did Thanksgiving become a national holiday? During what war? Civil War! That is correct! The Civil War. So, that's first try. First try. Good job, Josh. So, for those of you who haven't been through what is 8th grade history class, or for those of you who didn't pay attention in 8th grade history class, we're gonna, for those of you, the Civil War was not a good time. The Civil War straight up sucked. It was, nobody liked it. It was bad all around. People were dying all over the place, and the people who weren't dead were, starving or had all the diseases in the world. It was not a good time. Everybody hated each other. It was bad. But in the middle of that, all 8 of my cousins are at war, and 5 of them have died so far, and also I don't have any food, so I'm eating shoes. In the middle of all that, that's when they decided to make Thanksgiving a national holiday. In the middle of all of that is when they decided to make that matter. In the darkest time, I would argue as a professional historian, in the darkest time of U.S. history, that's when they started giving thanks to God as a national holiday. In the absolute darkest moments, in the trials, that's when we give thanks to God. And so that's what we talked about last week, the trials. In the middle of the trials, we give thanks. Last week we looked at the story of Paul and Silas, and they had been imprisoned and beaten. They, went and there was a lady who had a demon in her, and so they were like, hey, let's get that demon out of her. And then they got in prison for it, pretty bad thing. And then they were beaten with essentially baseball bats. So that's pretty bad too. And in the middle of all that, they were in prison, beaten, they were in the prison, bruised up, and you know what they started to do? Sing. They gave praise to God in the middle of those trials, in the middle of all of that, they gave praise to God in the middle of the storm. See, we looked at their trials, and how did they react to the bad times? How did they react to those trials? What did they do? They leaned on God. They sang praises. They were a light to those around them. And so we asked ourselves, well, we saw what they did when they went through those trials. What do we do when we go through our trials? Do we sing God's praises in the middle of our trials? Do we make ourselves a light in the middle of our trials? Is that what we do? Well, for Paul and Silas, God moved in the middle of those trials. Like, literally, he moved the ground because there was an earthquake and they freed him and all the other prisoners, just so that they could be a light to a prison guard. And that's because they were singing God's praises so that they could be the light. God moved in the middle of all those trials so that they could be a light. Now for us, we might not be able to see the effects of God moving in our lives all the time. We might not actually feel the ground shake when we sing praises to Him. We might be in that prison cell, metaphorically, hopefully. We might be in that prison cell, beaten and bruised, and we sing out to God. We sing God's praises, and we sing them all day. And then the next day. And then the next day. And then the next week. And we keep singing God's praises, but we just don't see God move in the middle of all that. But He does. So we gotta keep singing God's praises so that we can be His light. And so that's why Abraham Lincoln, during the Civil War, declared Thanksgiving a national holiday. Because in the middle of darkness, in the middle of all that horrible stuff, that's when the light shines the brightest. That's when we show God's light to others and God moves. So pop question number 2! Pop question number 2! Yeah. Thanksgiving was originally celebrated by doing what?
Oh, right there.
Oh, they were,
Yes.
I got it!
You got it.
The Americans and the Indians were having a big dinner.
Wrong!
Chasing turkeys.
Chasing turkeys? Wrong!
Right here. Right here.
Hang on.
Right.
What?
Right there.
What? Peace, no. No. Stand by.
Oh, basically what happened was the Indians taught the Pilgrims.
Wrong.
Farm.
No. Nope. Not quite what I'm looking for.
What did she say?
That's the same exact thing she said. Same basic concept. But no.
What's the right answer?
Okay, yes, by giving thanks, but how did they give thanks? They Calvin? Art, no?
I got it.
Google it.
Nope. Yes, by praying to God, but I'm looking for something else. I got 3 more people.
First harvest.
Wait.
The first harvest.
Google it. Cheater.
Wait, what was?
First harvest.
Oh, no. No.
Wait, Andrew. You looked it up.
From Google.
Have you answered? All right. I will.
Were they singing?
No. So, the answer that I'm looking for, the answer that I'm looking for
They were just vibing.
is fasting.
I don't know.
So, fasting, not eating. Thanksgiving was originally not eating.
That's a terrible plan.
I know. Not eating at all. Thanksgiving is originally fasting. So the Puritans, the people who actually started all this, the people who we learned about in 2nd grade, I don't know, that we learned about, were like the corn and they planted in the fish and the whole thing. That wasn't actually Thanksgiving. That wasn't actually Thanksgiving.
We're all grown up and fasting.
I I know, it's wild, it's crazy, it's weird. So, Thanksgiving was actually a completely different thing. They had a fall harvest festival, but they didn't call it Thanksgiving. And they had Thanksgiving, but it wasn't during the fall. It was just a time when they fasted. It was a time when after some big celebration or after especially good harvest, they would not eat and they would give thanks to God in the middle of that. So, lesson is next Thursday, no eating, we're all fasting. Got it? Good? Okay. Just kidding. Eat next Thursday. It's going to be good food. Okay. But it is interesting to me. It is interesting to me that the Puritans, the Pilgrims, that these early religious immigrants to North America, that they would choose to thank God by not eating. As their way to give thanks to God for these amazing things, these celebrations, they would choose to not eat. And they would fast as their reaction to good times. When good times happened, they would fast. And so that's what we're talking about this week. What is our reaction to those good times? What is our reaction when we have those great harvests in our lives? Last week we talked about how do we react to the bad times, and this week, what is our reaction to the good times? Because God's with us in both. When we're in those valleys, we react by praising God. But if we're up on the mountaintop and we don't react by praising God, what are we even doing? What's the point? So, what is our reaction to the bad times? What is our reaction to the good times? Spoiler alert, the answer is give thanks to God. So, the good times, it may seem easy. It may seem like, well, duh, of course, everything's going fine. I just won a basketball game, duh. I just got an A on that test, it's great. But it seems so simple, the reaction to good times is thank you. But so often, we just kind of forget. Everything's going good, there's nothing really to pray about, so we just kind of forget that God's there. And so, what's our reaction? It's so simple to forget. So we look at this, so I'm going to take us to the book of Exodus today, the second book of the Bible, and read about the Israelites. They are being led out of slavery. They're being led into the Promised Land. And we read how they see God move. We read how they see so many amazing things time and time again. And I have a list that's like a quarter, if that, of all the things they see, because I didn't want to just be reading a list for 45 minutes. But they experience God in the burning bush, the Nile turning to blood, swarms of locusts and frogs, the angel of death, the parting of the Red Sea, manna from heaven, water from a rock. They just kind of hit a rock and water sprang out. And a gazillion more things. If any of them are paying attention, they see God move. They see God's triumphs. They see God's victories. They see God all over the place. But they still forget. See, they experience the triumph of freedom from the Egyptians. They experience these huge victories. But they just forget about God. And they forget about Him in the middle of those good times because everything seems to be going all right, so why do they need God? So that's where we're going to pick up the story after this. So they're at the bottom of a mountain, Mount Sinai. They've been eating manna, which is like bread that falls from the sky. I don't know if it falls from the sky. But bread from heaven, basically. And they are just hanging out. Moses says, hey, you guys chill down here. I'm going to go up on the mountain. God's going to tell me some stuff. I'll be back. Just wait here. It'll be cool. And so, in Exodus 32 is where we're going to pick up. When the people saw that Moses was taking so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him. We don't know what's happened. We're going to stay on that one for a second. We don't know what's happened to him. You know exactly what happened to him. He's up on the mountain. He told you that. It's just you read, when I go back and read about these Israelites, Like, they seem so impatient. They seem so silly. They seem so like, he's up there. You know this for a fact. I don't know what's happened to him. Like, it just seems ridiculous. But at the same time, that's us. At the same time, every time we read something about the Israelites, it's like, oh man, they're so, like, they don't pay attention to anything. But that is exactly us. We think, oh no, where's God? We saw him this summer, but I didn't see him, this morning. So therefore, he must be gone. Where's God? We don't know what's happened to him. Do we not remember all the victories that he's done for us? Do we not remember all the battles that he's won on our behalf? Do we not remember all of the powerful, amazing things that he's done for our families? Do we not remember any of that? Oh, I don't know what happened to him. We are just as forgetful and just as impatient as these Israelites. So we're going to now keep going in Exodus. Aaron answered them, "Take off your gold earrings that your wives, sons, and daughters are wearing." See, Aaron's kind of a pushover in this story. It's not good. But Aaron answered them, "Take off your gold earrings that your wives, sons, and daughters are wearing and bring them to me." So all the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took what they had handed him and made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf, the cow, not like the leg, fashioning it with a tool. Then they said, "These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." See, we do this too. So often we see what God has done, we see what God, and we give the credit to something else. We see that God does something powerful, something big, something good, and we give the credit to something else. We see God's miracles, and we give the credit to a dozen other things. Now, we give those dozen other things as like luck, or like, oh, I'm just so skilled, or oh, the statistics were lining up for me, or ourselves. We give the credit to all kinds of things. We see what God does, and we take that credit away from him and give it to something else. And that's what the Israelites are doing here. They literally say, "These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." Melted earrings did absolutely nothing to get them out of Egypt. A cow made of gold did absolutely squat to get them out of Egypt. God did everything. But they just give all the credit, they give all the praise, they give all the thanks to just melted earrings, to just a thing. And it's so easy to forget about the good things that God does for us. Now, we don't give credit to a cow made from earrings. That's not what we do. But we have our own idols. See, the one that I face a lot, and the one that we're going to talk about tonight, because I'm in charge of talking, is the idol of ourselves. The idol of self-credit. Giving credit not to God, but only to ourselves. Now, that one doesn't actually sound like that bad. Like, of course, like, you did the hard work, you get the credit, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that we do that, we think we deserve all the reward for. There's a lot of hard things, there's a lot of difficult things, and we get an A on a test that we really studied for, that we really prepped for. We win a basketball game. That means you get the credit, right? Well, yes and no. See, in those moments of victory, in those moments of triumph, it shows our heart just as much as it does in those moments of defeat, in those moments in the valleys. If we don't give credit to God, then it's worthless. We gotta give credit to God all the time. We gotta give credit to God, and when He gives us amazing things, we can't just forget about Him once we're let out of the uncomfortable spot and we're sitting, nice and pretty on a comfortable chair. All of a sudden, we don't need God anymore. We gotta give God the credit when He does things for us. We gotta go to God in the valleys and the mountaintops, in the highs and the lows, in the good and the bad. See, when you get an A on a big test, yes, it is you that studied for it. Yes, it is you that prepped for it. Yes, it is you that paid attention in class. But who gave you a brain to focus on that? Who gave you the food to sustain you? Who gave you the family that cares about you and nurtures you? Who gave you the teacher that taught you everything, and then the 8 other teachers before that that taught you how to do the things? God. See, who gave you all of that? God. So do we thank Him? Does He get any of the credit for that? So, as some of you may know, as some of you may not know, I'm a big college football fan. And there was a player back in the year 2007. He was the quarterback for the Florida Gators, Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow was a really good football player. He won the Heisman. Yeah, he won the Heisman. So normally when a football player, gets a touchdown or a big play, like they all go jump on each other and slap each other's helmets, slap each other's butts, celebrate, like jostle around, all that kind of stuff. That's what happens normally when you get a touchdown. Or if you're in the NFL, you do something crazy, weird. But Tim Tebow is a little bit different. The very first thing he did when he got a touchdown was kneel on the ground, point to God, pray, and thank God for his life. Thank God for his skills. Thank God for his family and his teammates. Thank God for everything that has gotten him in that situation. And then after he thanked God is when he celebrated and went over to his teammates and his coaches and all that stuff. Is that what we do? Before anything else, do we give the credit to God? Is God the first one that we give the credit to? Now this goes for huge triumphs like winning a big football game, and it goes for little triumphs like an A on a homework or having a really good meal next Thursday. Though it goes for everything. Do we give God the credit before we give the credit to our teammates, or give the credit to our parents, or give the credit to, most importantly, ourselves? Does the credit go to God above all else? To God first? See, before we head off to small groups, before we go talk about all this kind of stuff, and the band makes their way back to the stage, we're going to do something a little bit weird, something a little bit different, something a little bit awkward or uncomfortable. We're going to give praise to God, but we're going to do it in kind of a different way. I'm going to ask us all to give praise to God by reading a psalm, all together, out loud, as a group. So we're going to read Psalm 145. So if everyone's can stand up with me, and we're all going to say it out loud together. Because we need to give praise to God. So Psalm 145. Psalm 145 is a psalm written by David, David from David and Goliath, the king. And he just writes a poem. It doesn't sound like a poem to us because we are not Hebrew. But he writes a poem that is all about giving thanks to God. He gushes out his praise. So, if you'll read with me, Psalm 145, 1 through 7 and 21. I exalt you, my God and King, and praise your name forever and ever. I will praise you every day. Yes, I praise you forever. God is the Lord. He is most worthy of praise. No one can measure his greatness. Let each generation tell its children of your mighty acts. Let them proclaim your power. I will meditate on your majestic, glorious splendor and your wonderful miracles. Your awe-inspiring deeds will be on every tongue. I will proclaim your greatness. Everyone will share the story of your wonderful goodness. They will sing with joy about your righteousness. I will praise the Lord, and may everyone on earth bless his holy name forever and ever. Amen. So, let's pray. Dear God, thank you for every amazing thing that you've done in our life, God. Thank you for my parents. Thank you for these people around you. Thank you for these lights. Thank you for every step that has brought me here. God, thank you for all the leaders here. Thank you just for every triumph that we've ever had, God. And let us remember, let us not forget that it is you who gave it to us. That it is you that we give our praise to. In your name we pray. Amen.